scan the QR code, make sure that you've checked into the session. And I would like to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Julia Hebenstreit. She is the Executive Director of the KIP Foundation since 2011. I'll let her take away from here.
Thank you. Is the mic all right? Good, okay. I don't need it in this room, but they said they were recording it, so I'm going to go with it, I guess. So, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're having a good conference so far. The snacks looked really delicious, so hopefully you got a little afternoon energy there. I'm going to just dive right in, but I will say please keep in mind during this presentation, it is on suicide and suicide prevention. We know that can be a very heavy topic and sensitive for some, so we want this to be a very safe space. So if you need to, we don't get into a lot of anything too terrible, but if you do need to step out, please feel free to do so. And also, I always encourage people to ask questions as we're going, because I'd rather have it more of a dialogue than me just lecturing at you here. So we'll dive right in. This is what we're going to cover today: who we are as the foundation and what services we offer to anyone throughout Nebraska. Some statistics and data, different pieces of language and why that can be important, and then suicide risk factors, warning signs and protective factors, how you can help in your roles, and then some self-care for yourself, and I'll talk a little bit about 988. Although, did anyone in here go to Michelle's session last session about 988? Okay, one. So I was going to say, if there are a lot, I won't take too much time on that one. Okay, so, and then we'll end with some available resources. All right, so we are, the KIP Foundation is based in the Metro, but we do serve the state of Nebraska in a variety of ways. A Voice for Hope and Healing, you are currently participating in that. We go around and do presentations throughout the state and really into the Midwest region on mental health, suicide prevention, community resources, healthy coping skills, combination of all of those. We do about 300 of those a year, and they are at no cost to any group that you want. So if you ever are in need of a speaker on those topics, or in any group you are a part of, whether it's work or a service group that you're a part of, you can sign up for one of those right on our website. And then the Metro Area Lost Team, we are fortunate to have the founder of the Lost Teams here, one of the co-founders in Nebraska, Don Belau, sorry. If you want to chime in anytime I'm talking, have at it. He's the expert on Lost. So, Lost is Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors. It's a national model that was started in Baton Rouge, and I think it came to Nebraska in 2008, right? Yeah, in Lincoln. And then we started the groundwork for the Metro team in 2014, but it did not go live until 2015. And now there's 8 active teams throughout the state. So I would like to get a feel for where you all are from. How many of you are from Lincoln? Okay, a good portion. Omaha? Kearney area? Grand Island-ish? All right, a couple back there. Anybody like out in the Panhandle? One, all right, there we go. Okay, so the 8 active Lost teams are throughout the state of Nebraska. So every behavioral health region does have one currently. So sometimes the geography makes it a little difficult for some of the greater Nebraska teams to be there, but we work with law enforcement, and every team works a little bit different. That's the one nice thing, or there's many nice things, but one nice thing about Lost is that it's very, you can make it what your community needs and wants, as long as you're sticking to that true core model, but it's adaptable, so that's great. So I'll speak to the Metro one, and Don, like I said, if you want to chime in on LinkedIn or anything. So we work in Omaha with OPD, Sarpy Sheriff, and Douglas Sheriff, and we have someone on call 24/7. The initial model was created to be immediate response with law enforcement when a suicide occurs. We have found over the years that, at least in the metro area, we have moved more toward, I would say, 99% of our call-outs are what we consider a delayed call-out, and that might be the next day, the next week. A month from now, we've had one person call 4 years later, and it's really, so we're notified of the suicide, we reach out to next of kin, and we're there to help them move through that immediate crisis of losing a loved one to suicide. It is a free service, and it's not meant to be a therapeutic model. It's more of a peer-to-peer model to provide those loved ones who are grieving hope to move forward and to help find some direction, but ultimately connect them to the resources that they need, which may be therapy, but may not. Some are support groups, just kind of varies for the family. The team consists of survivors. So in suicide, a survivor is someone who's lost a loved one to suicide. When I use survivor today, I'm not referring to attempt survivors. So survivors and clinicians. And every call-out's a little bit different, but typically 2 survivors and 1 clinician will go out, meet with the family. The call-outs usually happen at their home. It can be obviously very sensitive and emotional, as you can imagine, and sitting in a coffee shop surrounded by people just really doesn't work for this very well. But it's driven by the family and what their needs and wants are in that situation. So typically they do happen in the home. Again, it is not meant to be a long-term thing. I think the most we've ever met with family is 3 times, and that was unusual. Usually it's 1 or 2, and you will help connect them again to the services that they need. So that's typically how the call-outs go. They all look different. Every family is different. We're not there to define who a loved one is. It's free to anyone who's lost someone who needs that service. Typically, we, from law enforcement, get the next of kin information, but oftentimes we'll also get roommate, girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever it might be, and we can reach out to all of them and help them through that. Anything you want to add?
Well, thank you for the invitation. A couple of things. One is that we through the years that since lost teams have been developed in Baton Rouge, there have been various studies that compared whether or not or compared the time period after suicide loss that a family might wait to seek out support. Those who have received a lost team call compared to those who have not. So the data across several different studies indicates that oftentimes most families and individuals will reach out within a matter of just a few months, generally 3 to 4 months after the loss, to seek out therapy or some type of support. Without a lost team call, it could be 5 to 7 years. And you can imagine the kind of pain and trauma that goes through an individual after losing a loved one suddenly to suicide, or having seen that person struggle for years of mental health crisis in their lives. So that person without a lost team support at some level will agonize. So certainly it's a journey of healing that the lost survivors and the individuals as part of that lost team are able to facilitate. Metro Area Lost Team under Kim Foundation support has provided a wonderful support for, frankly, hundreds of families now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And it is all volunteer-based as well, so that's something to remember. And with our Metro team, we do kind of have a twofold with that also. So obviously the most important is helping that family through that immediate crisis, but we also are using the police reports we receive to track that data of gender, age, means, and zip code. Also any narrative information we can pull from that report, but those are the 4 core pieces that we receive from every agency. And we use that data to really focus on our prevention efforts in the community. So what trends are we seeing? And so More Tomorrows is our public awareness campaign around suicide prevention. If you visit the website, moretomorrowsne.org, and I do have a resource card back there. It's everything you can think of suicide prevention. Warning signs, you can scroll over them and it'll give real life examples of what that might look like, talking points, how to even set the room for the discussion, crisis resources, obviously, there's different videos. So I encourage you to check that out because there'll be way more information than I have time to get into today. So that is, and we do leave that campaign pretty fluid. A lot of it is digital, just so because we know trends are changing constantly. So we want to be able to target the messaging to where the needs are in our community. And the Metro Area Suicide Prevention Coalition, this is a group of community members that just are interested in suicide prevention. We come together, our coalition goals for the year align with the state and national suicide prevention goals and strategies. And then we just take that into the community and really focus on those initiatives. Some accomplishments, some of the more public or I guess more noticeable to the community. We did work with OPD and the counties to get hope signs put up with, we just changed them to 988 now obviously, but on bridges, parking garages, different places throughout the city, and Lincoln has those as well. I'm not sure actually where they all are in Lincoln, but in Metro those are kind of the key areas, overpasses on the interstate. And they just provide a brief hopeful message to someone who may be in crisis, and then the 988 crisis text line. That was a big one. And then we also provided a suicide pre and postvention toolkit to every middle and high school in the metro area. And then from the Metro Area Suicide Prevention Coalition, we have another program that's on the next slide, I'll just do it right now. One of our goals last year is to host our first ever youth summit. And our coalition really helped us with that and was the driving force behind that. And so we started the Empower Youth Summit for 9th through 12th graders in the metro area, really throughout Region 6. When I say regions, does everyone know what that is? Because so our state split into 6 behavioral health regions, which are different from other resources we have here. So you're currently sitting in Region 5. So the summit had over 300 students from 22 different high schools, and really just empowered them to advocate for themselves and others, focus on their mental wellness, self-care, and obviously some suicide prevention was woven in there throughout the day. And then Nebraska School Mental Health Conference, we just hosted that last week. We alternate between Kearney and Omaha, so next year we'll be in Omaha. If you have any interest in anything school-based mental health, we bring in national experts, state experts throughout. There's CEUs available. We keep it pretty reasonable, we think, and it's gone so well over the last several years. We've actually been asked to host the first ever Middle America School Mental Health Conference next year. So we're going to do 2 days of regional and 1 day of state. So more information to come on that. And then A Time for Hope and Healing, that is our fall annual event where we bring in a national keynote speaker about a variety of topics around mental health and suicide prevention. This year's is focusing on the role employers can play, because we continue to see that working age adult have very high numbers in our suicide deaths in our community. So and obviously employers are the best way to get to many of that age group, but they're the hardest also, because not a lot of them are doing lunch and learns around suicide prevention or mental health. Some of them are getting better, certainly, but he's really going to focus on the role they can play. And then I already talked about the Empower Youth Summit. Be There is it's an initiative under the More Tomorrows campaign. So this just came about last year. We were seeing, again, unfortunately, pretty high numbers in our community. And we knew between Thanksgiving and Christmas that people go to the service industry a lot, right? They're getting their hair done, they're getting their nails done, they're going to the bar, restaurants, they're going out to dinner. So we really wanted to focus on those areas because we knew people throughout the community were going to them. So Be There, it was very simple, like be there for yourself, be there for your friends, be there for your neighbor, be there for your community. And we provided window clings, posters, education for the workers within those facilities as well. And we thought it would just be that month, but everyone loved it so much, we just kept it going. So now we're in several different businesses throughout the community, and there's a couple here in Lincoln actually that did some too. So if you ever have any interest for that, there's posters, like I said, window cling stickers, all that kind of stuff. So, and then there's a QR code on it that takes you to the More Tomorrow's website and has like 90 days and stuff on there. All right, so some of the statistics. All right, anyone want to take a guess here what this watch with the 11.5 means? I know I got the last session right, everyone's tired, been here 2 days. All right, I'll give you the answer. So statistically in our country, we lose someone to suicide every 11.5 minutes. Unfortunately, that number is going in the wrong direction. Just a few years ago, it was every 13 minutes. Again, this is national statistics on average, but certainly we want to make sure to see that going up, and it shows the importance of prevention work and early intervention. What about the 90% arc right there in the middle? Quiet group. That one's hard, actually. Very rarely gets answered. So 90% of people who die by suicide had an underlying mental health condition. And it's not to say necessarily that it was diagnosed appropriately or at all at the time of their death, but looking back, it could or should have been diagnosed. So that just, again, goes to the importance of making sure we're intervening early and connecting people to the resources they need when they need it. What about the bar charts there? You guys are going to make this hard on me, aren't you? All right. So suicide is the second leading cause of death. And this is a national statistic, but also true here in Nebraska. For 10 to 24, and most years 10 to 34, second leading cause of death. I think it was Don 16 in Nebraska is a leading cause of death for 10 to 14-year-olds. So we're seeing younger and younger kiddos not only attempt suicide or have suicide ideation, but die from suicide. So when we hear from schools and community groups, we can't talk about that in middle school or late elementary years. Yes, we absolutely need to be talking about it because we're losing 10-year-olds in our state to suicide. You know, and what we always encourage people is you need to be talking about mental health and mental wellness very early on, from a very early age. It sounds different and it's delivered differently. Maybe we're focusing on emotions and identifying the emotions and how to cope with those emotions, but it's still, you should start that conversation very, very early. What about the one in the young gal circle here?
Check on the 501.
Check up, I've never heard that answer, I love it. That is a good answer, not what we were implying here.
Self-isolation.
What'd you say, I'm sorry?
Self-isolation.
Self-isolation. Whoa, well, I mean, a good answer again. One more, anybody? Yeah.
1 in 5.
Yes, 1 in 5 grades 9 through 12 kids students have seriously considered suicide in the last year. How many of you work with youth and teenagers? Oh, I guess everyone in the room, right? All right, so are they, well, she's not technically a teenager anymore, I can't call her that. But, so I have a daughter that's in that age group, and I feel like, do you feel like they're always forthcoming with information and tell you? 9 through 12th grade. They're not always the most honest, right? So this was a self-report study, and 1 in 5 already reported that in a self-report study, but you have to think there's more of those kids that didn't feel safe coming forward and admitting that. So it's probably, depending on where you are, closer to 2, maybe even 3 in certain times in certain areas. What about the car accident, or the wrecked car?
Driving while drunk.
That will tie in a second when I give you the answer, but I appreciate you guessing, thank you. Reckless driving also will tie in. So in Nebraska, every year we lose just as many, if not more, people, on average, I guess, to suicide than we do car accidents. But when I just drove here from Omaha on the electronic billboard, what did I probably see? When you drive anywhere on I-80, what do you see?
How many people died?
To the day on our roads. Very, very important. Traffic safety absolutely is, don't get me wrong. But we start having that conversations with kiddos very young. Buckle up, don't text and drive, don't drink and drive, don't drive too fast, don't play your music too loud. They go through driver safety course. But when we're losing just as many people in Nebraska to suicide, why aren't we having that same conversation and early on? So we just like to shine a light on that for people just to kind of put that in perspective. Okay, so this data that I'm going to get into is from 2022. Please keep in mind it's only from these 3 reporting agencies. We have had some people take this and be like, these are Nebraska's numbers, and they're not. This is just in the metro area from OPD, Sarpy, Sheriff, and Douglas. So this is the 6-year comparison of data. So we started collecting data in 15, but we feel like 17 was really the first year that we could get a good comparison that we can use moving forward. So we had 99 deaths in our community by suicide in 2017. 10 of those were youth. We knew that, we felt like that was a very high number. Again, we didn't have other years to compare that to necessarily from these 3 specific agencies, but 99 seemed very high to us, and 10 Nebraska youth seemed extremely high, or 10 Metro youth, I just got myself there. So we really focused on youth prevention and just really suicide prevention overall. We did see that decrease by 10 deaths in 18, and 18 and 19 stayed consistent at 89. But our youth numbers went down significantly. And so we saw 4 youth deaths in 18 and 5 youth deaths in 19. Unfortunately, in 2020, the entire world imploded, right? Everything was happening, not just COVID. We were in the middle of a very tumultuous election cycle. We were having a lot of race relations and law enforcement relation issues throughout our country. It was just a horrible, horrible year. And if you think about as adults, like how hard it was for us to process all of that, the youth just really didn't stand a chance to really process and understand what was happening and where we were going. And so, unfortunately, nationally, we kept hearing we're seeing more suicide deaths because of COVID. We did not find that to be true in our community. We actually went down by 13 deaths in 2020. When we started that, when COVID was started, after we realized, oh, this really isn't going away, right? Like, we're not going to be back to work in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. we gathered a group of stakeholders from all across the community and thought, okay, where do we need to focus our prevention efforts during this time? And unanimously it was older adults and working age adults, because we didn't know what was going to happen with the job market, we didn't know what was going to happen with the economy, and seniors were very isolated in their residence homes or wherever they were living and aren't as good at technology overall, not to generalize, but and that was the way we were all connecting with people. And so we thought those two would be our areas of concern. We learned very quickly that that was not the case. We were all wrong. Our youth were struggling more than we could have imagined, and unfortunately that year so keep in mind 19 was 5 youth deaths. In 2020 we jumped up to 11, so more than double, and our worst year on record of death. 2021, unfortunately we saw the same thing, 11 youth deaths in our community. And then, and we think about why is that, is it because of the pandemic? Are we, seeing more anxiety and depression, or are we just identifying it more? I don't know that we'll ever have the answers for that. Some of you were just in here for the social media session last time. That can certainly play into it. But also schools are the place that we do most of the prevention work. They were just trying to keep their doors open and keep students in their classrooms. So suicide prevention was not necessarily something they could take on at that time. We are seeing that change, certainly, and doing better in terms of getting back into schools and stuff. And it's no fault of the schools, that's not all what I'm saying. I do not envy them for what they had to go through during that time or any time moving forward. So in 2022, we did see, after focusing significantly on youth prevention, we did see that number decrease down to 7, so 4 fewer, but still 7 is quite a lot. 1 is too many, 7 certainly is too many. And then this year, unfortunately, we are already at 6 youth deaths in our community, and we're midway through June. So things are not going well, and again, just really, I can't emphasize enough how we as a state and communities, we need to gather everybody. Everybody has a role in suicide prevention, not just mental health therapists, not just schools. We can all really work to save lives of not just our youth, but of all Nebraskans. So this is by gender, and this is 2022 again, keep in mind. So nationally, data shows that males die by suicide about 4 times more than females. Anyone want to take a guess why?
Video games.
The means they choose.
Yes, means they choose are typically more lethal. And so we were seeing 76 male, 21 female. We're a little bit above the national average, but pretty close. So this is the 6-year comparison by gender. I don't need to go over all of these, but you can see it stays pretty consistent across the board. So in our community, we are staying true to the national data currently, fortunately. So this was interesting. Last year, 2022, 90%, or 90 of our 97, so a little more than 90%, were white in our community. That was, and what we had seen in 2021 and 2020 a little bit, we saw a significant increase in minority suicide deaths. And we tried to, we're working with different areas in the community, different community partners, and we did last year see that go down quite a bit. Obviously 97 deaths overall is too many, far too many, but we are unfortunately seeing that spike again in minority suicide deaths in our community. So we have been bringing in additional community partners for the suicide prevention, really working with community partners that already have established relationship and trust in different areas in our community to reach, because culture can play a big piece of prevention work, and we can't be everything to everybody, and we don't want to be. So we want to bring in community partners to really help with that.
I have a question.
Yes.
So in your statistics from 17 till today, the youth that have died by suicide, the majority of it is probably video games. How much of it is bullying?
So we don't know that most of it is, that had anything to do with video games. Actually, some of them probably did play video games. Unfortunately, that's some of the narrative information we get from police reports, but never reported on consistently, so it's difficult to give you an actual number. We do know bullying plays into suicide as well. One thing I'd caution people though, and you'll see this when we get to the risk factors, is if you ever see a youth suicide or hear about a youth suicide, one of the first things you hear from people is that I bet they were bullied. And maybe they were, but maybe they weren't either. So because we need to make sure that proper prevention and anti-bullying resources are available in the community and in the school districts that they're in. And so making sure we're not just making that assumption is really important as well. And the other piece with bullying, which I'm not going to do a whole bullying speech here, but we need to make sure that we're focusing on the kiddo who's doing the bullying as well. It's not just the individual getting bullied. So typically we do not share means and method when we talk about suicide. It does not follow best practices. But with this group, we felt like it was really relevant to what you do in our state. And so gunshot wounds, nationally again, it usually is about 51%, always a little bit more than half. We were fairly high last year, unfortunately. So we saw 60 by firearms, and then it goes down the list there. I don't need to read them to you, although hopefully you can see them there. These are typically what we're seeing in terms of means, and this just really focuses again on what can we do for lethal means safety, how can we play a role in that, how can we have safe conversations around this. All of the regions throughout the state provide free lock boxes for prescriptions, free gun safety logs, and a variety of the VA also has some if you ever in need of them. So it's important to make sure that we're getting those out to the community and focusing on the importance of why people need to be using these and educating themselves around this. So this is the 2020, this is the most recent data that we have for the state with these pieces. And the suicide prevention plan was released in January. You'll see a lot of this in there too. So our state suicide rate is 14.9 per 100,000 people. And you can see the national average is 13.5 per 100,000. So in 2020, we were higher than the national average here in Nebraska. So the second leading cause of death for 10 to 24-year-olds in Nebraska, we talked about that. And the second leading cause of death to 25 to 34-year-olds in 2020. So that 10 to 34. This is a heat map that shows where in Nebraska, so you can find your county. I'm not going to go into all of these. It might be kind of hard to read, but I can share these slides if you don't have them on the app already. But this, obviously, the darker it is, the more concentrated the number, and it varies from wherever we are in the state here. Sorry, I'm standing right in front of the light. This again is the 5-year average for all ages. You'll see again, the darker it is, the higher concentrated it is, and out in the Panhandle in 2020, that was, or the 5-year, 2016 to 2020, a very high concentrated area there. And then this is the same 5-year period for ages 10 to 24. So it varies now, it changes a bit, and you'll see up here, that's about region 4, so the Norfolk-ish area. That was the highest there when we're looking at the youth, not in Norfolk specifically, but in the region 4 area. All right, so language. Why does language matter? Language can be a very powerful thing. It's something we all do every day. We don't think about it, right? We have written language, we have oral communication, like we do a lot of different things. But it can be used for both good and bad, and it can really further the stigma and shame and guilt around various things with mental health and suicide. So you always want to make sure you're using people first language. And that is true in anything, not just in mental health and suicide. So that individual they're still a person first. They're not a depressed person, they're not an anxious person, they're not a suicidal person. They are someone who is experiencing those things. And you want to make sure that you're identifying them as a person still. And then slang words. Okay, this is a safe space. Everybody's gonna have to participate. I'm not saying any of you have ever said these things, but what have we seen on TV shows, or what have you heard family or friends use of slang words that could refer to mental health? Crazy. Cuckoo.
The R word. I won't
Yeah,
say it.
I'm with you. Hate that word. Schizo. They use bipolar or OCD like as an adjective. What did you say? Psycho, yeah. Emo. Oh, sure. Any others? You get the idea, right? They're out there, and typically people aren't saying them to be harmful or hurtful, but you never know who around you has been impacted by mental health. And plus, it's just not needed language. And so we don't want to continue the stigma that already exists too often around mental health. What about nonverbal communication? What is a nonverbal act that you see people maybe do that could correlate with mental health? Yeah, you see this a lot, right? What about suicide? What is a nonverbal communication that we see around suicide that could correlate with suicide? Yeah, that's one of them. Oh, yes, that's another one. Yes, okay, this is the one we see most often, right? And usually it's because people are bored in a conversation or want to be out of whatever the situation is that they're in. What they don't know is they have absolutely no idea around them who has been impacted by suicide. And that can be very triggering for someone. And not just suicide, but anyone who's experienced gun violence. That can be very triggering. And there is always, 100% of the time, a better way to express whatever it is they're trying to say. So what we encourage people is don't attack them. Don't be like, oh my gosh, you can't say that. You want to use it as a teaching moment because, again, they are not doing it probably to be mean or rude to someone. So just help them understand why that can be hurtful and what can we replace that language with in a more healthier, positive way. All right, what about committed suicide or died by suicide? Which is more appropriate? Died by. Thank you. We always get a mix on that one. So yes, for many, many years, we had, everyone would say committed suicide. Over the last, I don't know, what do you want to say, 15, 20 years, it's really started to shift to the died by suicide. It helps eliminate some of that stigma. It certainly, for survivors, helps eliminate some of the shame and guilt that the families are feeling. And it's not a crime anymore in our country, to die by suicide. People are understanding it truly is a disorder of the brain or the result of that. And so we need to make sure that we're shifting that language, and it can be very helpful in a positive way to others who have experienced it. And I already talked about the survivor versus attempt survivor. So these are some risk factors. I always caution people, just because you see something on this list that either you or a kiddo you're working with has experienced, that does not mean that you'll ever think about suicide. It's just like with anything else, the more things on this list, the higher risk they are. You'll see bullying there, down on the bottom there with bullying and harassment. That certainly can be a risk factor, especially if the protective pieces and supportive resources aren't in place. I'm not going to read through all of these lists, but the mental health conditions, that's really important because especially if it's not being treated properly or treated at all, then it can be a significant risk factor. The physical illness, disability, and pain, we typically see that as when in the older population or adult population. Not always, but most often there. A lot of this just comes down to conflict, different disappointments and failures. Physical and sexual abuse, I will say really verbal and emotional abuse as well. There's been so many studies now to show that the impact of verbal and emotional abuse on the brain can be just as impactful as physical and sexual abuse. So it's important to make sure that any kind of abuse or trauma can certainly play into this. So these are the warning signs. These are the more symptomatic things that you're going to see. Hopefully you get to know the youth that you're working with pretty well over time, their families, and whether it's at work or the people in your lives personally, you get to know them. So you want to watch for a change in the patterns of behavior. With any of these, they say that change in behavior, if it's 2 weeks or longer, is kind of when you need to start being, reaching out for help and getting that help. I caution people though, if you have concerns on day 1 or day 2, don't wait till day 14. At least have the conversation, ask some questions, see what's happened to that individual, what's going on, how you can support them. So talking about killing themselves or just death in general, and that does not have to be like you and I are talking right now. It doesn't have to be moral communication. You see a lot posted on social media. Teachers will see it like in assignments that are turned in at school, artwork. So it can be expressed in a lot of different ways. Increase in the use of alcohol and, yeah.
What if you have, I'm gonna start crying. What if you have no idea and there's no signs? I just went through this a few weeks ago with my younger son who's 32. Okay. And he didn't go through with it. Thankfully his dad was able to stop him. Mm-hmm. But there were no warning signs at all, and it was because of a breakup. And he had to spend 2 days in the Lincoln, I don't even remember the name of it, and now he's in therapy, and everything like that, but his dad and I had no warning sign at all.
And that can happen, certainly. We're not saying every time you're going to experience these warning signs. There are things that can be impulsive acts or a reaction to something that's happened. I think like through conversation, a lot of the times you'll see that, like thinking back, oh, I should have noticed this, or I saw this but didn't know what it meant. And hopefully your son, I'm glad he's in therapy, and hopefully we'll start moving down that path of recovery and continue in therapy, because that's really important as well.
They can be really good at hiding it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's a really big part of it, is they hide those signs.
Yes, especially from parents, that can be really difficult. And so, again, it's just really important to watch any changes that you can, or anything if you have concerns, or it's just not, maybe not communicating as much, or not coming to family dinner, or, just kind of isolating themselves, even just a bit from his family. Certainly ask that question, have the conversation. And you don't have to jump right away to, are you thinking of suicide? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Just ask, what's going on? I've noticed. But when you have, and we're going to get into some of the conversation, be very specific if you do notice things. And if not, if you just feel like something's off, just talk to them and see if you can. Hopefully you'll never have to deal with this again personally, but certainly, unfortunately, that does happen sometimes where there is no warning signs at all.
Julia, can I speak to that?
Sure.
So part of the experience that was mentioned, the parents often are the last to know. And one of the reasons that parents and loved ones are often last to know about the level of emotional confusion and chaos that one is experiencing is that the person who's experiencing chaos simply doesn't want to be a burden.
Yeah.
So not wanting to be a burden and a worry to others, they will internalize. And so it is not unusual. We tend to call those suicide attempts and those who experience suicide loss as being out of the blue. And that is a category that unfortunately does exist within our world of called suicidology, which is the study of preventing suicide and providing follow-up care. When we look at this suicide warning sign, if you look at it closely, it's not a master list. Meaning if you don't check the boxes up there, then you're safe. I wish I could say that. The reality is we're not safe. It's part of that process of listening to your heart, and when the experience happens, be able to respond and provide quality care indefinitely, not just 2 weeks, not just a month, but over the next year. Be there and be prepared to ask questions other than asking the question, "Are you okay?" Or how was your day? For those of you who've had a 7th or 8th grader in school, and you ask those kids, "How was your day?" What do you suppose they're going to say?
Fine.
Fine. Yeah. Thank God I didn't say anything more, right? But the reality is we have to be careful and select our conversation so it is not a routine conversation, but one that's insightful and caring.
Yep, absolutely. A few others that you'll see, like when they talk about the behaviors, like change in eating, sleeping habits, those can be big ones. Giving away possessions or saying goodbye, and saying goodbye sounds a lot of different ways and will come across a lot of different ways as well. Just realized we have 20 minutes and we gotta get through a lot here. Okay, so the important thing to remember is that yes, there's a lot of risk factors to know. There's a lot of warning signs to look for, and as he said, that was not an exhaustive list. But the nice thing to know, or I guess hopeful thing to know, is that there's protective factors that we can put in place as well that can really help decrease some of those risks and concerns. So really it comes down a lot to connectivity. How connected is that individual? And especially like when we're talking about youth, they don't need to be the most popular people or have 15 different friends. They need to have a couple people who are true and close and connected in their lives that they feel like they can turn to. And that might be a peer. It might be someone, on the maintenance crew at school that asks him every day, every time he walks by him, how are you doing today? Makes that connection. It might be someone who's serving lunch in the lunchroom to them. It might be the school counselor, it might be the parent or guardian, but it looks different for everybody. And how connected are they to activities? How connected are they to the resources that they need? So a lot of it is going to come down to that connectivity. Having the last two here on this slide are the most important. Having access to treatment. It doesn't do us any good if we identify those warning signs in someone or we're concerned about someone, but we can't get them the help that they need. And so really working on building up our entire continuum of care throughout our state, focusing on that early intervention and prevention, but making sure we have somewhere to connect them to with the help when they need that is really important. Especially with youth, since most of you are working with youth. We are doing a better job in Nebraska really focusing on that school-based mental health care so that it removes some of the barriers already. They are in school already, they typically trust school, and the people, they know the people there, they feel safe usually, and so it's important to keep building that up. Not having access to means, again, I already kind of talked about some of the lethal means safety pieces we can put in place. If we can remove the means or method from that individual, the likelihood of them living or living longer certainly continues or is increased significantly there. Additional protective factors, having strong problem-solving skills, having healthy coping skills to work through those concerns or experiences when they're living through those. I'm not here to define spirituality for anyone, but if they have some form of spirituality that they're connected to or faith, that can certainly play a role. And we know a lot of families, we're seeing a shortage of behavioral health workforce in the state. We know that. We hear a lot of families are going to their priest, are going to their chaplain, whoever it might be. So it does play an important role, and we don't want them to take the place of mental health providers, but a lot of families trust them and go to them. So we need to make sure they're educated on what they need and where they can connect to resources as well. Again, family, we're not here to define family. Probably a lot of the kiddos that you're working with maybe don't have that strong family support, but what else? What other networks and pieces can we build up around them? So how to help? The most important way certainly is learning the warning signs and where to connect for help if you do identify those warning signs. But you also want to take any comments about suicide very seriously, especially in the youth population. We hear from parents or educators, well, they say that all the time. They're just looking for attention. Maybe that is true, but if that's what they're expressing and their way of handling whatever situation is happening, something else is going on. So we need to make sure to dig a little deeper and help them in whatever way they need at that moment. So take any comments very seriously. Never leave someone alone. Things can happen very quickly, so even if they say, can I go to the restroom, don't let them go alone. Obviously, you're not going to go in a stall with them or something, but make sure they're never left alone at all. If you're concerned about someone, set time aside and talk to them. Have the conversation. We all lead very busy lives, but if we're concerned about someone, we need to take that time and have that conversation with them. Ask the question, asking the question, are you thinking about suicide, does not put that idea in their head. That's one of the biggest myths that we hear out there. You need to be having these conversations. And oftentimes if you take the time to ask someone that who really is struggling or maybe in crisis, they're going to appreciate that you cared enough to ask them and that you took the time to support them through that. So SOS, Signs of Suicide, put out I think this is like the easiest acronym around suicide prevention that we can have. Acknowledge, Care, Tell, ACT. So this is, if you go to SOS or Google SOS, you can find a lot more information on this as well, but all of us can remember ACT. Acknowledge, Care, Tell. So we're going to go through these signs here. Acknowledge. Acknowledge what they're going through, acknowledge the signs that you're seeing, and express those. Again, be very specific about, don't say I'm worried about you. Well, why are you worried about them? I've noticed you missed our last meeting, or you haven't been going to school, or whatever it may be that you see in the youth that you're working with. Make sure that you acknowledge that and be specific. Be sure to ask what's going on, not is something going on. Again, the open-ended questions are always going to get you more information, and they won't shut down quite as quickly. Refrain from judgment or the impulse to fix it or fix them. They don't need to be fixed. They need support and they need help, and they need to know that they have someone there that they can trust and talk to openly. You also don't have to have the answers. You don't have to be everything to everyone either. And so just listen, and it's okay to say, I'm not sure, what the answer is here, or I'm not sure what we can do, but I'm gonna be here every step of the way to help support you in finding those resources. I will help connect you. You don't have to have the answers all the time. Don't argue, debate, or analyze your situation. Certainly don't tell them it's not really that bad. Oh, when I was younger, I went through this. They do not want to hear that. That is not helpful to the conversation. And they're in no position to argue or debate anyway, and it's not going to be helpful to the situation. Show that you care and say it. That is okay to do. I'm worried about you. I care about you. I want to make sure that you're healthy and well. I want to make sure you're safe. Too often, obviously you have boundaries that you have to respect and policies that are in place, but we tend to shy away from expressing that to people, and it's okay to do that and let them know that. C, so care. When they're done talking, validate their feelings. How many of you as a professional, again, safe space, this won't leave this room, have you ever had a youth sitting across from you, whether it's in your professional or personal life, and they're telling you something and in your head thinking like, this is what you're so upset about? This really isn't that big a deal. Has anyone ever done that? Yes. Okay, I've done it with my own daughter, so I feel like, yes, it happens, right? But it's really important to try and set that aside, because to them, right then, that is a very big deal, and they're experiencing it and they're living it, and so to them it is impacting them, and so you need to acknowledge that. Again, connect them with the support and resources. That's important to always what's going to be the next step there. This is just a sample of what you could potentially say a talking point. I can't imagine how difficult this must be. Please know that I'm here for you and I care about you. I can't fix whatever the problem is, but let's find someone who may be able to help you. Again, you don't have to have the answers. You don't have to be the therapist for them, but help connect them to what they need. Avoid statements saying, I know how you feel. Nobody knows exactly how someone is feeling in any given situation, and that can turn people off a lot more than it's going to be helpful. It could be worse, certainly don't say that. Snap out of it. We still hear people say that, unfortunately. You need to get over X. It's really not that big a deal. These statements and statements like these are not going to be helpful to any situation in this instance. T, that's the next one, tell. Tell a trusted adult, follow your gut, tell your supervisor, follow your policies that you need to put in place. If you don't have them, put them in place. If you're concerned that they might be thinking about suicide, ask them directly and then tell someone, whatever your policies may be, and depending on what role you play in that individual's life. Help them create a safety plan. I'm going to show an example of one here. You do not have to be a mental health therapist to help somebody create a safety or wellness plan. You could literally Google safety plan, and a bunch are going to pop up. Some are better than others, I will say that. But what do we need to do to keep you safe? And do this with someone that when they're feeling well, because when they're in crisis, they don't know who their trusted adults are. They don't know what they need to feel healthy and well in that moment. So do it with them when you feel like they're having a good day and doing better. But it can be like, these are the medications I'm on. This is what I need to make sure to do. This is who you need to call. This is, you probably have their emergency contact already. So make sure, and it can be very detailed, it can be very simple. So there's, again, a variety of ways out there to do that. And then this piece I really love too out of SOS. Assess the severity. It's 3 questions that you need to remember to ask. Are you thinking of suicide? If the answer to that is yes, what's the difference between if I say, are you thinking of suicide, or are you thinking of harming yourself, hurting yourself, which is much easier for people to say.
You can be planning on harming yourself without trying to actually carry through suicide.
Absolutely. People self-harm for a variety of reasons, and everyone who self-harms is not attempting suicide. They're not even thinking about suicide. Sometimes they are. But also, to someone who's truly suicidal and in crisis, they're in so much pain. Their answer to the question, are you thinking of hurting yourself, is going to be, no, I'm going to end that pain. So it's going to be very different. So even if it is hard, be direct with the statement or with the question, are you thinking of suicide? And this feels really uncomfortable and weird for people when I tell them, practice that, role play it with a colleague, say it into a mirror, because when it comes down to it, it can be very difficult to say, especially with someone that you're very close to, that you've worked with a long time. It can be just a hard thing to say if you don't do it regularly, which hopefully you do not have to do regularly. So are you thinking of suicide? If the answer is yes, you move to the second question. Have you thought about how you would take your life? Have you thought about how you would do that? What's your plan? It doesn't matter how you say it, just get that point across. If the answer to that is yes, then you certainly move down to the next one. Do you have access to those means? No one's gonna say it like that, right? And if you said that to a youth, you'd be like, what? So if he says, yes, I'm gonna use my dad's firearm or gun, okay, well, do you have access to that? And if it is in the home, just assume they have access to that, certainly. And then that's an immediate, like, 911, 988, connect to help, depending on where you are. The one thing I like to caution for people too here is if the answer to 1 or 2 is no, don't be like, oh, phew, I don't have to deal with this today, thank goodness. There was obviously something else going on that was concerning enough for you to ask the question. So it might not be as imminent, but you still need to make sure they're provided some resources and support and keep checking in on them. All right, here's just an example of a safety plan. I think it's 2 pages here. Again, I can send these out if you don't have the slides, but you can Google safety plan, different templates come up. There's a variety of very established plans and some also that are just more simple, but important to make sure everybody has one, even you yourself. So what you do is very difficult, obviously, you know, so you need to make sure you're taking care of yourself as well and helping them identify healthy coping skills and mechanisms, but making sure you do as well. One of my favorite sayings is you can't serve from an empty vessel. None of us got into this, whatever, you all do different things, but in this social service field or the service field to become rich, right? Like that's not why we do it. We want to help others, we want to serve others. And you can't do that if you're not taking care of yourself. Practice self-care. Okay, I can do the slide, but I want to hear from you. What is your favorite way to, or that you practice self-care, or the most important way?
Meditate.
Meditation, thank you.
Sleep.
Sleep, that can be a good one. Just recharge a little bit.
Fish.
What?
Fish.
Fish, oh, I like that one. Have you seen, okay, this is totally off subject here, but have you seen the commercial about women fishing?
No, I haven't.
You should Google it. It's really, and it just how empowering it can be and like how they do better like later on. It's a great little ad. What else? What about exercise, physical activity of any kind? Journal. I'm so old school, I like pen and paper, but there's many digital journaling tools. There's apps out there that you can share with your youth and yourself. YourLifeYourVoice.org is a great one, has an emoji mood journal that they can check in at various times in the day. That's also on the resource list back there. All right, so 988. I did want to talk about this here before we end. So 988 is the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And so it was an 800 number before, 800-273-8255. No one ever is going to remember that number, especially if they're in crisis. For the last several years then, at the national level, people have been working to get it to a 3-digit calling code similar to 911. Before I put this slide up here, how many of you have heard of 988? All right, I know you that many in there. That's fantastic. Okay, so it is there. 988 was built on 3 pillars. Someone to call, so you're going to reach a trained crisis counselor 24/7 and someone in your community. So you are routed by your area code. Obviously in Nebraska, I think we currently have 3, 308, 531, and 402. Our state call center is in Omaha on the Boys Town campus. You're routed to that one. They also are an overflow call center, so they often get calls from people with other area codes. I will say that's the hardest thing about it is because we have people from all over here in Nebraska, right? Like people move here and keep their phone number. So that is one challenging thing. So if they still have like a Florida or New York number, they're going to be routed to that call center. You can ask to be transferred to your local call center. So that's important to let people know. So 3 pillars, someone to call. You can text, chat, or call. I will say the texting and chatting, depending on where you are, all the resources aren't completely built up yet, but we'll get there. Someone to come. So a crisis response team, someone to come to the individual who's in crisis. If the crisis counselor can't de-escalate the situation or feels like it's more serious or severe than they can handle or will be able to, they will send out crisis response. The only people in our state that can send out crisis response is the helpline 988 and law enforcement. So you couldn't call and be like, I need crisis response here, depending on what your role is. So that's important, but it's a great way to really help that family or individual de-escalate that situation. They're trained mental health, licensed mental health therapists, and every region in our state does have one, but they all obviously operate a little bit different. It's difficult in, let's say, Scotts Bluff, and maybe the individual is 2 or 3 hours from there out in the country somewhere. That's very difficult to get there in a quick time, right? Something's already going to have happened, or the individual is no longer going to be in crisis. And so a lot of out in greater Nebraska, we're seeing a lot more telehealth in those situations, which is better than nothing. So we want to, they'll continue to build up the capacity around that. And then somewhere to go. Again, it doesn't do us any good if we identify these situations in somewhere, but we don't have anywhere to take them. And we know that our workforce, we're seeing a shortage in our workforce here across the state, really across the country, but we are seeing it here too. And that is not a quick fix. So really working to build up our continuum of care and making sure we have every level of care that individuals need. It's not always going to be an emergency room, but outpatient therapy isn't always going to be enough either. So we need to make sure we have everything there. So someone to call, someone to come, and somewhere to go. On the other thing I'll say is it's also a great tool that, like, if you, depending on the situation you have with the youth, but you can call that and put it on speaker. If you feel like I can't take this on, I don't know what the answer is, I don't know how to do this, call it, put it on speaker, and you can hear the conversation and with a trained crisis counselor as well, who will be able to help that youth. And oftentimes it's helpful too, or the individual that you're working with. It's helpful because, like, how many times have we gone into a doctor's office even, and they tell you 8 different things that you're supposed to do, and you walk out and maybe remember 3 of them, right? So someone who's in crisis is really going to have a hard time remembering everything that is said and talked about there. So it also provides that support. More Tomorrow's ME.org, already talked about that, and all of these resources are on little wallet cards back there. Take as many as you like. We do have Spanish ones. I don't have them with me today, but if you want them for your offices or anything, please let me know. KimFoundation.org, our website has a wealth of information on all things mental health. Voice Home National Hotline, YourLifeYourVoice.org, I mentioned that one. It's a great resource. One of my favorite things on that website is they have a list of 99 healthy coping skills. And not everybody's going to do all 99, but everyone can look at that list and find one thing that really works for them. So that's a great resource to put up in your office, take with you, take a picture of it, have it on your phone. Nebraska Family Helpline, this is for anyone to call. It is not mental health related. They will tell you they get calls about, like, I can't do my homework, to, like, my child just threw a chair across the room at me. So it varies widely there. The crisis text line, 741-741. This is a national crisis text line. We're not sure what's going to happen moving forward because 988 does have text. This is a separate resource from that. We get really great feedback. The only caveat I will say on that one is a lot of them are volunteers who are responding, and they don't necessarily go through that extensive training that someone at 988 has gone through, but we get great feedback on them. I know a few people that volunteer for that, and then also community members who have used it. So always a great option. For now, it's sticking around. We'll see if they merge or what happens down the road. And then the Trevor Project, this is a great resource for the LGBTQ IA+ community, and it has all things that you may need on that website. It's a great resource, has tons of information, not just mental health and suicide, but a wonderful resource there. And then this is my contact information. If you have any questions, you will see the QR code there for evaluations to provide feedback on what you'd like to hear more of, just on the content itself and the presentation. But please reach out if there's anything that you need that we can do to support you or your organization. And there is swag back there, but wanted to open with 1 minute. Any questions that I can stick around to if people have questions? Almost the end of the day, end of 2 long days.
Centerpoint also has a crisis line.
Yeah, yes, Centerpoint's a great partner of ours. And they do have Lincoln and Omaha as well, and they actually serve into Region 3 now that Tim. Would you work at Centerpoint? Oh, nice. Very nice. I was just out in LA with Toby.
And I work
Tammy.
with youth and family.
Okay.
Very
Very nice.
yeah.
Good. Any other questions, comments? All right. Well, thank you for being here. Enjoy your evening before tomorrow.
Great work.
Thanks for the tag team. I know, a lot to cover in an hour.
You're
Or
wonderful.
does it still have
You're doing a great job, guys.
Oh, thank you. It looks like this died. Looks like this died. I didn't
deaf team at